versus under capacity, and the socioeconomic impact of diversity that is most easily defined by the free and reduced meal percentages in those schools. So that's where we're going to start today's discussion. I don't know, we never know exactly who is participating in our Let's Talk or in interviews with the newspaper. I was called a mental midget, and while I don't deny that, it's the first time anybody's done that who wasn't related to me. And so unless one of my sisters actually was that person, I just wondered how you knew I was a mental midget. We really haven't lost our minds, as was quoted in the paper, and we truly are. This committee is dedicated to getting this process right. We fully understand, and we take very seriously every single comment of concern or support on any issue in this process. So we encourage the public to do two things: continue to share those concerns with us, and what you're doing today, participate, be engaged. As I told one parent today, we're not the only smart people in the community. There are a whole lot of smart people, most of them right here in this room. And you may have some good ideas or suggestions as you listen to and see our process that perhaps we're overlooking. So we encourage you to help us find the right answers here. We may or may not have all the right answers. And again, remember that this committee is charged with making recommendations to the school board. We all serve here at the pleasure of the school board, who also gave us a number of guiding principles to help channel our work. And we're operating under those conditions. And when we make our final recommendations, and believe me, we haven't made any, there's no decision, no lines have been drawn. I say this every week. You'll know when they are. But so far, you'll see dozens of different scenarios tonight up on this board. And when you see them, it is for the purposes of this committee to analyze if a certain idea might or might not work. It is not a decision. And unfortunately, what's happened is some folks are seeing a scenario and they're going back to their neighborhoods and suggesting that that's what we've decided to do. Please understand that it's not the case at all. We are nowhere near making those decisions yet. This is still an exploratory and interrogative process to get to the point where then we make recommendations to the school board, and they will decide either to accept, reject, or modify that which we give them. So I will reiterate one time again, you don't need to call or write or stop in the grocery your school board member, because they're not part of this process. Melissa and Doug Barnett can't be here tonight, by the way. He had an emergency that he had to take care of. But they are ex officio members, so they don't even get a vote here. They're here to help us inform and guide. We ask them questions. You'll hear from time to time about whether the board would let us do something, make recommendations, follow a certain path. But it's this committee who will be making these recommendations. So we invite you to write, call, text, stop us at the but you don't have to do that to the poor school board members. They're going to, when we make recommendations, have at it. That's what they make the big bucks for. So we encourage that. But until then, they're just ex officio members. I think that's all I had. Today, Lisa. Other than to formally announce that Melissa Bacon is now an ex officio member to this committee, replacing Darrell Love, who was sentenced to the superintendent selection process. I'm not sure which one of them got the better end of the stick, but Darrell's on selection. Melissa's now ex officio here. And I think that's all I got.
Hello, everybody. It's great to have you all back. I hope that you had a lot of time to reflect over the past week at the work so far and come back with all sorts of new ideas. Scott, are you on the line?
I am.
Great. A couple of things for the committee. You'll see we've given you again tonight the Let's Talk comments, and we have got more comments in the last couple of weeks. So I know that you'll need some time to look those over, but there are two comments that keep recurring, and I'd like the committee to think about them and to tell us if you'd like to do something differently. The first of those is people are repeatedly questioning the time and date of our meetings, and that was a decision that you all made early on. So I just want to point that out to you that is something that keeps coming up. The second thing that keeps coming up is that people want to see the maps. And you guys have not given us maps yet. You have not told us this is the map.
Right.
But I'd like for some direction from the committee as we move through this process, if you can be very clear about which maps you would like us to put up. We can put up the initial scenario maps that Scott drew, but when we did that with the high schools, people thought that those were proposals, and they really were just to start the discussion. And so really as committee members, we need you to give us that direction because we are very committed to informing our community. We want our community to be a part of this process. We do not want to hide any part of this process, but we also want to minimize our community getting up in arms when there is nothing to get up in arms about. Ron?
Just one member of the committee, and the rest may not agree, but I don't want any map shared until we actually agree on one. We haven't agreed on any maps. I mean, we're talking about doing some more public forums. The Ellens have talked more about that, where some potential ideas, where we've narrowed it down to a couple or a few, but it just inflames things to put maps out there that we haven't had any agreement upon. This is going to be what happens.
Yeah, I think the only problem with that is they're going to get up in arms anyway. Clearly, we've already seen that. So I don't know that.
Well, last time we had the statement too on the maps that said these are not proposals; these are simply working documents. So I think if we add the maps, we've got that disclaimer on there, that might help with some of those issues.
Lisa, I think that we are not prepared, Ron is right, to put maps out that we haven't agreed on as the direction we want to go. I would have no objection. I don't know if this is possible. There, I'm okay with putting them all on the website for folks to take a look at, with the disclaimer that these are simply working scenarios and no decisions have been made.
And by that, Alan, do you mean the scenarios that you have started the meetings with that Scott had done, or the scenarios where you freed your work to come back to? Because that's where I feel.
And everything in between. We go through a number of different scenarios as we ask to look at different things during our contemplations here. I don't mind putting any of those, or rather all of those, on the site if that is doable. I don't have any idea what the technology will allow or not allow.
Lester?
I think that's going to be very labor intensive and hard to do, but I don't think it's feasible to show them where we started, where we got to at the end of the meeting, where we left off. And I think we want to be extremely transparent, because I think regardless of what we do, there's going to be that sense of urgency from the community either way, whether they don't have a map or whether they have a map. They're going to be passionate about what they're passionate about.
You're right, and it's clear that a lot of people are following our process, but it's equally clear to me from all the letters and comments that I'm getting that only these few people who are really engaged in coming each time actually are fully engaged, and so they're getting tidbits here and that sort of thing. So I want to make sure that we are totally and absolutely transparent, as we have been. But we got to continue to do that, as Lester says, because there are those who are not 100% engaged in the community and only get engaged when they think that their particular neighborhood school is involved. So I'm willing to do whatever the pleasure of the committee is. I don't have an objection to the public having access to what we have access to.
I think if we're going to do that, though, I'm with Lester on that one. You would have to do the one we start with and the one we end with, because you miss one math, and you could have a ride on your hands, because it would be the one math as the one scenario that somebody else thinks is the best, and then they'll say, well, you forgot this one, and I was in the room, and you had one where this one was this street, and then you have everybody looking for something that you don't even know exists, and it has way too much room for error. The way we stop and move and start and stop, So if we're going to do something, it would just be where you begin and where you end, not all the in between.
Well, and just to remind everybody, that in between is captured in the video that Scott sends after each meeting, that actually takes you from where you start and where you end. What people have been asking for is a PDF of where you ended. And that is what has not been provided so far up on our rezoning website.
I think we're good with that. As long as it
Good to provide it or good not?
to
provide it, okay.
as long as it, and I suspect that not everyone will notice that this will be disclaimed as not an official map that we're proposing, but if we at least put that disclaimer on there, we can refer to that when people call us.
This is where we left off at 6:30.
Right.
We're going to
6:30 on Thursday. Lisa, let me go back and address what you said about our times and dates. This committee, if you go around and count, we have approximately 21 committee members, and we are consistently having 18, 19, and 20 people participate every single week. These times have worked for this committee, and I'd be unwilling to change much of that. However, a few of us have discussed that we need to probably pick the pace up even more. We've doubled the number of meetings that we had originally scheduled. We were going to do one every 2 weeks. Now we're basically doing one every week. We are scheduled for 4 meetings in January. We want to add 2 more dates in January, so they obviously can't be at the same time on Thursday nights, for public input. We want to do 4 meetings and 2 public input opportunities to take questions, to hear comments from the public. We want to do all of that in January. Our goal still is to try to give the school board our best recommendations somewhere between the middle and end of March. So in order for us to do that, we recognize that we have a whole lot of work still to do. And we're gonna petition the staff and administration to help us make that happen.
Did you have something to say before I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah. The public forum meetings that you're referring to have to take place after we share the latest PDF maps, so that the feedback that we get is relevant. Because, and I was going to mention this before you brought that up, if we're sharing the maps that we're working on, then what we're getting in feedback and emails that we get is more accurate than people upset about what are you doing to my school without them seeing what we're working on. So yes, January, maybe later, after we've got a couple weeks to show the maps.
Well, I'm going to guess, Lester, that what we're shooting at is like the 3rd and 4th weeks of January. I mean, that.
Another thing I'm not clear on, and I'm on the committee, when we make this recommendation to the board, when, if it's approved, will it take effect?
When the schools are built. It's my, I think
Yes,
that's right.
the elementary, well, yes, but this committee has also been tasked with developing an implementation plan. That implementation plan includes the rollout. We have 2 new elementary schools opening in the fall of 2016. So we have that as a hard date that the elementary school zones would take effect then. How you roll that out, who you grandfather, that will be a school board decision with your input. The high school opens in 2017. We do not have a new middle school opening. So that middle school date is, again, going to be something we're going to be looking to this committee to recommend with all of the grandfathering and other logistics. I'd like to remind the committee that you are working right now with 2013-14 enrollment data. Scott and I spoke briefly before the meeting, and he expects that at our first meeting in January, we will be able to walk you through projections and the process followed to develop those projections so that our community understands just how deep this data dive has been, and so that our entire committee and community has a good feel for what Scott is predicting we can expect in terms of future enrollment. You have said in the past that every scenario you've run is going to be revisited once we have those numbers. Do you think that we'd be ready for public forums in January, knowing that?
I don't know.
And let me ask this, how long does
Ask the
this,
question differently.
how long does
Could you
this
repeat the
committee,
question, please?
okay, how much advance notice would you like to give in advance of a public forum?
That's a better question. Yeah,
Okay.
I would think so.
So shall we say that the committee is very interested in having an opportunity for community input, not necessarily on final versions of maps, but on the work to date? And let's say that on January 15th at your meeting, you will decide when you would like to hold those meetings. And if you feel like you might need that first week of February to get ready, then we move them then. And if you feel like you're ready at that point to do them the last week of January, we do.
However, I think there's a consensus amongst us that we need, under any set of circumstances, to convene at least 6 times in the month of January. So if those are not public forums, they would just be regular meetings. And clearly, they couldn't all be on Thursdays, so perhaps more of the community who can't make these meetings could come at another time.
Do you all want to establish those dates right now?
Not this very minute.
Okay.
I was asked to get with you in the next day or two and figure out what that was.
We can do that, and we can send out a poll for this minute. Okay. Are you ready to get started with the conversation tonight? Okay. Scott, I don't know if you were on the line yet when Alan said they would like to start with closest elementary schools, not to capacity.
Okay, just closest.
The closest elementary school scenario map that you developed for the committee, which shows just how many students would have to be in each school if everyone went to their closest school. And right now we don't see anything on our screen, so if you started sharing with us, we have a technological problem.
I started recording, but I didn't share. Okay.
Okay.
So that's what I'm bringing up now is the closest school. This does not leave any unassigned areas. These are each individual school's closest study area. I mean, just to reiterate, it goes from the center of the study area and goes out on a straight line until it finds the closest school, and it will assign itself to that school. So that's why you get some funky things like this over here. It just happens to be the way it is. But that's where we come in and we do the adjustments. So
this is all generated by the computer, correct, Scott?
100% generated by the computer. When I do it, I just tell it, give me the closest school, and it gives me that information.
Thank you, Scott. Just to point out, because we've had a lot of conversation from our friends who attend or are in the Wellington school boundary zone this week, and just if we follow this scenario, and I want to make sure that the community members understand what we're looking at here. If we follow the scenario that puts every child, every student in the school that they are closest to, the results of that for Wellington itself would be the worst overcrowding in all of Fayette County at 178% of capacity.
Correct. There would be 1,163 children going to Wellington. So for nearly 1,200 children, Wellington is their closest school.
That's right. And if, and we may decide in our recommendations that we just don't care about that, and we may assign every student to its closest school. That may be our recommendation. But if not, then we have the questions of how do we move particular neighborhoods out of the capacity crunch at Wellington, and to where would they go? Where do we draw the lines, and where would those 80% over capacity students go? Now, we're not at that right now, but that's what the scenario would be if we did every student in Fayette County going to the school that they're closest, that they live closest to.
And that's a year old thing.
Alan,
And that's last year's data. What's the point for me?
share that, something that was shared earlier on in our meeting here about capacity, why capacities are where they are, in the state of Kentucky mandating things. They mandate the numbers they shoot for. Why you can't say, okay, let's send 1,200 kids to one school. Somebody that knows more of the details than me want to share that?
There are general guidelines that are put forth by the Kentucky Department of Education and from educators nationally. There is, normally when you read an article about education, it's a lot of, some people say this and other people say this. But when it comes to school size, there really is a lot of agreement that you don't want an elementary school to be huge. And you can be too small, but 650 is the figure that KDE recommends, and that is the figure that we generally build our schools to. Jump in, Mary.
Can you do a little bit more to that too? Because
Hang on, Mary. Take a mic.
When KDE looks at our capacity, and when we develop a district facilities plan, they consider all of the capacity in the district. So if we have schools, if we were to put 1,200 children at Wellington, that means that there would be several other schools that were sitting campuses, most likely. And obviously, they encourage us to utilize the resources we already have available. So rather than putting portables or build onto that facility, they would say you need to develop a plan so that you're maximizing the use of resources that you already have before you start building more. And so we would probably run into a great deal of pushback if we were to try to take that approach.
And they probably would not approve then that third elementary school on our facilities if we still had empty buildings.
Right. But they know that we're growing, and so that's important.
So Lisa, after hearing that information, we can look at the other capacity too. We can get some at one. Should we just not just move from this particular scenario? I mean, it's obvious that it's not reasonable in regards to the overcapacity and the undercapacity, and move to the next scenario, which would be the which one is not closest to the neighborhood, but the capacity scenario.
And just to point out that Russell Cave Elementary would have 42 children and be 14% full.
Right.
So,
And Plains Mill would be at 28%.
scenario we talked about,
Garden Springs too. Right.
aren't there over 1,000 kids unaccounted for in the closest to capacity?
Yes.
So then there's 1,000 kids that are unaccounted for.
Right. Okay, so just for the committee, it's for the community to understand, Scott ran this scenario as a potential jumping off place for the committee. He also ran a scenario where he sent students to their closest school and filled them to capacity.
Right.
And then stopped filling them. That I think was what you were asking for, just to clarify. Yes, ma'am.
And Lisa, before we get too far into it, do we need to, for instance, Liberty, any that has a program, do we need to change that capacity to allow for that program?
Well, Liberty's special program is for the children who live in that zone.
Okay.
The only true magnet program we have at the elementary level is Maxwell, and that's why you'll see there's a school on the map that doesn't have a zone. And Dixie, but we've talked about that at the last meeting, where Dixie has a magnet program that accepts people from out of the area, but that program has always been where they serve neighborhood children first, and they only have seats for those.
And have we adjusted for Meadowthorpe and Ashland?
No.
We asked it to last time.
I think so. Ashland has 400 on it.
I thought you guys,
We do that?
Bob, look at those numbers and tell me, did we adjust that down?
I don't see new numbers after last week.
Okay, so Ashland is showing with a capacity of 400.
Right.
Is that truly the building capacity, or is that the building capacity minus? Because we've got Meadowthorpe showing as 600, but with the construction now, would that be 650?
Probably. And I think Ashland is really a capacity one.
Really? Okay. So then do we need to pull? I thought someone addressed that last time and said we did not need to set that aside. Okay.
We talked about it, but I don't know that we actually.
Okay, so shall we, Bob, Mary, Vince, do you think we should adjust the capacity at those 3 elementary schools with the gifted and talented clusters? Adjust those down? Okay, and do you want to leave some seats at Dixie too, Bob?
If we want to keep that program, leave some, yes.
How many?
I would suggest 100 at each of the Meadowthorpe, Ashland, and Tate's Creek. At least 10 is 100 each.
Okay. And how about at Dixie, 100 as well, or 50? 75?
No, more.
150?
Maybe. Right now they get 40 to 60 per grade.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that would be 200 to 300. So 250? Or do you want to go high and go 300?
I wouldn't go high.
Okay. Okay, so Scott,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we need to adjust down the capacities at Ashland, Tate's Creek, and Meadowthorpe. Adjust them downward by 100. And we need to adjust the capacity at Dixie downward by 250.
What was the third one? I've got Ashland, Tate's Creek, and there was a third one going down 100?
Meadowthorpe.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. So, Scott, can you show us the map that you did that has, the scenario that you did that has elementary schools, closest elementary school to capacity?
I sure can.
Thank you.
Got a question. When we adjust for capacity, we're not deleting total population. Do we know where those kids are coming from? So, for example, my question comes from the fact that I know as principal of Pine Station Middle School, 8% of my students are part of LTMS's magnet. So when I look at my numbers, if I'm at 108%, that's okay because I'm looking at 8% going to a magnet. Under that scenario, do we know where those students, as we adjust capacity at these elementaries, do we know where those students are coming from to look at a scenario in which we adjust capacity? That's the first thing I want to ask. The second thing I want to ask is, as I sit here and I'm actively engaged in this conversation. I've got, and I may be the only one on left field all by myself with this thought process, but we're putting a map together using this year's data for 2016. Because we have to have this in place when those 2 new schools open. That's why I asked, when will this map take in effect? And would we be better off projecting those numbers?
You will have those January 8th.
And in terms of your first, this was, I was looking at the minutes from the last meeting that we just approved. I had asked if Scott could adjust those attendance numbers to include the people who are coming in from out of district, that are moving from into magnet programs from out of those school areas.
And
Those
he
are
had
real
those
numbers.
today.
Yeah.
Scott and I talked about it, and Scott, I'll let you just answer the question, but he did share with me prior to the meeting that he had those. Scott, do you want to explain what you were sharing with me earlier?
Yes. Well, to address where those students are coming from, one of the first meetings I did this matrix, it's based on the 13, 14 students, and this shows where the students go versus where they live. So, for example, in Athens, Chillsburg, there's 100. What's that?
You can call it 8. We all call it 8.
Okay, 8. There's 146 students that are going there to this school, but they live in Breckenridge Elementary School's attendance area. So when we could track all of those special programs. If I go over to the right here, Maxwell Spanish Immersion, for example, there's 28 students there that are living in Ashland's attendance area. So we can see exactly where all these students are coming from in these special programs. That way we can then adjust what we need and look at that. We also have the information of where they're going. If even not in a special program, they just happen to be changing attendance area. That's, again, we can see that. There's Mary Todd, has 95 students coming in from Russell Cave. They're transferring in. Not sure why they're transferring in. I don't believe there's a special program there, but it at least tells you where the students are transferring and moving around the district. And then as for the projections, I agree. We are going to have projections in January. We'll be able then to take what we've learned and take what we've worked on and then vet that against projected data. Now, I'll warn you now, and we'll reiterate this next week or next month, that when we're doing projected data, I can't look at the socioeconomics. I can't look at where they're going to special programs because it is a forecast, so we just have numbers of students in those study areas. So we're going to do something, we're going to look at it first as projected data, forecasted data. This is what we think it's going to look like in 2016 and 2017. And then if we want to get those socioeconomic numbers, we have to go back and look at the 14-15 data and kind of apply that. So we're going to look at it numbers first because, again, we can't project exactly what's going to happen. We can make the assumption that the socioeconomics and the makeup of these students are going to be fairly similar only in 3 or 4 years from now, but we won't have that exact data.
Scott, can we also use the same type of transfer data by study area to project possible estimated people who would go to certain programs?
Yes.
And or can we use the 14-15 data to grow forward so that we know we'll be staying in special programs?
Yes, we can. And yeah, we discussed that. We called it a redistricting by enrollment. We've done everything by residence, and that's the way you plan for long term. You want it to be able to last for 5-10 years, but we can, again, vet that information that we come up with a redistricting by enrollment. This takes, in our case, it's going to be the 14-15 students. I think Lisa said she's going to be getting me the latest updated one. That's what we'll be using from now on. I'll redo these attendance matrices, and we'll have everything based on 1415, the most current data. I can look at that, and I can mark students by their enrollment code that won't change schools if their attendance area changes. And so what this is saying is that if a student transfers into a school that has a special program, they're going to that special program, wherever school that study area they're residing in goes to, they'll still stay at that special program. So it gives you a better idea of what the enrollment will be. The problem with this is you can only do that on current students. So when we're looking at the high school one, we're going to use the 2014-15 student data to help us project with the 2017-18 students where they might choose to go to school. So we have to take that, again, with a grain of salt. That's why we always start with where the students reside, and then we vet it against what those other things, their enrollment patterns, their transfer patterns, their special programs. Because programs, like I've said before, can change schools, can go away. Others programs could be added. There's many of different things, so that's why we always start with residents. And I know you're sick of me saying that because I say it every meeting. So
or do you want to give them some instructions on where to go next?
Well, there's two things that I do want to say. I don't necessarily 100% agree giving out maps in the middle of this process, but I can do that. And what I'll do, and I don't know why this is not coming up, what I can do is make a map at the end of the process and just name the map where we're at, basically 11 or 12/18 2014 at the end of the meeting at 6:30. Something like that. I'll come up with something that says this is our stopping point for this amount, for this time frame.
Can we name it not official?
Oh yeah, I'll put drafts and not official and everything like that all over the place.
Is it also possible to maybe only show areas that we've discussed and black out other areas so that schools that haven't been discussed yet, people know that we haven't gotten to that part yet?
Yeah, I possibly could. I could, but yeah, I could see about that. I'm sorry, I'm having a little problem here with the computer. I'm going to have to restart something. Not my whole computer. I'm going to restart the ArcGIS program. So one thing maybe, and I don't know if you guys have discussed this or not, are we going to be giving the board a single scenario for each attendance area, or each grade level, or are we going to give them multiple?
We want to give them
One.
Okay. So we're going to work through this as much as we possibly can to what we think is the best fit that we can for the district. That's perfect. So what I'm going to be bringing up that closest school by capacity, and I think we started playing with that a little bit and looking at it, and we want to look at where the overcrowding is and where we can actually add more students. Okay. Let me just bring this up here again. I apologize for it bombing out on me.
I have a question. I know with the high school and middle school that when we started moving around, we overlaid the current boundaries. So when we start moving, we can change the least amount of students as possible. Is that something we want to do?
For me, yes. I believe that's always a part of what we'd like to do in any redistricting process. And I will have those current boundaries, in fact, are the blue lines here. I'll have those up as we're doing it. So these blue lines are the current boundaries.
Thank you.
And I actually don't think it might not be a bad idea to give multiple scenarios at each level, just so we don't forward us back up against the wall. They can take our recommendation. Well, and then the blacked out area. And then with blacking out areas, I think it might be some of the schools or communities might take it if they're not a priority. If we're not looking at them, you know, at the time the maps come out, they might take it, you know, why is that committee so focused on this area? So, I mean, I can just see how it can be taken in a negative way. Scott, what was you going to say about the multiple scenarios?
Oh, I was going to say, I think we should concentrate on one scenario because we're getting really good input. You guys are coming together with consensus, it seems like, with all these scenarios. We're doing really well with that. I don't hear a lot of infighting. I think we should only maybe present 2 different scenarios if we can't come up with a consensus on one. If there's an area that really is split. Because I think if we give them one, I know they would like to have choices, but their input is going to be heard well before it gets to them, I'm sure, if that makes any sense.
Do we want to look at the scenario of fewest changes like we started on the high school level?
I kind of like to personally start with the closest schools. That's what we keep hearing about, you know, the elementary
I
school.
don't mind starting with it. I think I'd like to at least see what fewest changes looks
But
like.
if we overlay the current areas, then we can kind of work that way, that if we're having to move an area out of the closest school, move it kind of where it is now.
If nobody else wants to see it, then we can.
No, but you're suggesting that for elementary, right?
Yeah, well, that's the way we started the high school process, is we looked at the scenario of fewest changes.
I think that's a
the way we look at
I
it
like
now.
I'm in
The
agreement.
problem with the closest school is there are so many problems with that scenario.
Yeah, we already looked at
I mean,
that.
if you look at the numbers,
Moving on.
you've got 184%, 14%.
I would,
It's like there's problems.
I agree with that, with the caveat that we look at the fewest changes, but look at the capacity numbers as well. Capacity is important.
Is that what it is? Is it the fewest changes? Bringing the schools to capacity?
I don't think we have that scenario. Do we?
No, he
Yet?
didn't create one.
No, I didn't create a fewest changes plan. And I'm not sure it's very possible at the elementary school. It was much easier at the high school. I think the closest study area is the fewest changes because you're going to get that, we're going to want to put that study area to the closest school. Now, I'm sorry, I'm going to take that back. You're right. It depends on what we're trying to do. If we're just trying to balance the number of students in each attendance area to their capacity, then yes, we could do a closest or a fewest changes. And that would start basically on our current plan, our current elementary attendance areas, and then we would look at the problem areas and go from there. So we don't want to change attendance areas just to change attendance areas, and I understand that.
We have stated as a guiding principle, and the former superintendent and school board members have been saying at speaking engagements, and we've been saying it here all along, that we're not looking to reassign every household to a new school. We're trying to incorporate a new high school into our model, and how can we do that by disrupting as few lives as possible, I think is a place we should look to start.
And we also have, remember, two new elementary schools that we have to carve out an area for. So the fewest changes, we would probably start with getting an area for these two schools.
Guys, I have to speak, I'm sorry. The feedback we're getting, and one of our guiding principles is close to school. The feedback that we're getting, and one of our guiding principles is neighborhood schools. So to look at what we had and look at what we've been presented and go back to what we had, I think it's a step backwards.
I think that we've already looked at the closest school map and saw that we have some schools at 14% capacity, some in 180% capacity for the problematic areas that we started. I mean, we can't do it there. That what he's saying makes perfect sense.
Closest does not take into account where they're located. That leads to that.
Do something about Scott.
Scott, we're getting.
I'm getting a really bad feedback.
Or are we? Let's, you want us to call you right back? Okay, we're going to hang up and call you.
Okay.
And there, what we need to recognize is there is a difference between students who are closest to the school versus the students going to the school that they're the closest to. They may be outside of the realm of what we can accommodate in terms of capacity, and so that can't be the only guiding principle that comes into effect there. But it is an important one that we should continue to look at. It is also, my recollection from this committee, our very first attempt at looking at any of these boundaries was to have the least impact on our community members as we could, the absolute least. While Ron is correct in that the schools weren't built with that in mind, the neighborhoods haven't developed with that in mind, and therefore that too is not a perfect scenario. I do think David's suggestion of at least taking a look at that, as we did with the high schools, and then examining what those problems are and try to adjust from that, we may come up with some sort of a compromise between those two guiding principles. So I would like to see, is Scott back on yet, by the way? Do we know?
He should be.
Scott, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there he is, okay. I think we would like to see the next scenario on the board, please. The least, for elementary schools, the least number of changes that are possible to capacity.
Okay.
If we can do. So in other words, trying to get each school to capacity, moving the fewest number of students that we can, just to take a look at that.
Alan, I have a question. I apologize I wasn't here.
Oh, Phil, I'm sorry.
Last meeting.
I knew I recognized that voice.
We made a decision as to where the location of the elementary schools are.
Yes, we know where the schools are going to be.
Okay.
And they're already on the
And they are on the map.
They are on the map.
You're trying to determine the location of the school in light of some of this overcrowding.
No. No. I mean, what we've been given, Bill, for the one high school and the two elementaries, are the locations have already been cited. The land's been purchased, I assume, and all things are moving forward there. So we have to treat those as though they are there when we put this new map into effect for 2016 for the elementary schools.
So then I have a question for Mary.
Okay.
When we took into consideration the location of the schools or purchased the land, did we review where the growth is, where the overcrowding, and made a decision as to where to locate the schools for the future, or were we looking at the present?
We were actually looking at where we expected development to be happening, so hence the pool that's off Polo Club in that area of growth. One of the reasons that we selected that site. The other one off Georgetown Road also is to help Sandersville is very full, and also that area is continuing to grow around Coventry. So it was to address where we knew there were growth areas. One of the restrictions, and I think we've shared this with the committee before, is that we need to identify unoccupied property within the urban services boundary, which means we have about 2 choices. You know, when we start looking for a school site, it makes it incredibly challenging. But we felt like those 2 sites definitely addressed the needs for those growing areas. It would also help to relieve some of the crowding that we currently have, like in Liberty and some of the other schools. That, of course, is going to mean that there's going to have to be some shifting because we've got to move kids into those many schools.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Did you get what you need?
Mary, also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have looked for land to help with the crowding and the wellness in that corridor. And there is not available land there. And that's why we went with the Wellington site that we had.
Alan, I would like to further clarify, mostly for the folks that are witnessing today, that regardless of what scenario we start with, there's going to be a great deal of tweaking to get to a final product. So speaking for just myself, I'm just as interested in finding the inequities that exist, like the Stewart Hall situation, and address those if we can, regardless of what scenario we start with.
Right. I totally agree. And I think that that's a universal thought here.
I think it is too.
Yeah, that's what we all want. You know, there aren't really adversarial positions here, but we have to use data to get to some sort of a scenario that we can all begin to tweak in the right way. And again, I want to remind everybody that just getting these lines in place is just the first step. We then have significant conversations about grandfathering and how that will impact whether someone's closest to the school or not, if somebody's grandfathered in because they're already there. And I think it's clear from all the community input that we've got, there's a wide discrepancy from folks who want to be grandfathered in or do not want to be grandfathered in. They want to move immediately to a next school, that sort of thing. All of that. And then you take in siblings, and then we take into consideration travel concerns and costs of transportation and all of the tangential impacts that these scenarios will create. And we can't even get there until we begin to at least equitably draw these lines as best we can. I think it's important to note, too, that while we all have a pretty good idea of where neighborhoods are in Lexington and in our community, our maps don't show neighborhoods. We don't have names on neighborhoods. We have, you know, working numbers on each little zone. So we, you know, when we are challenged by picking on a particular neighborhood or not, I think it's fair to note that we don't really even know which zone matches up with what particular neighborhood. And I think that's important. We did that on purpose. We don't want to know. We don't want to get into those conversations right now. We want to do what's best for the entire community, for all the schools, for all of our kids. And then we'll start taking into consideration some more specific kinds of things, as you mentioned, for example, in Stewart Hall. So, I don't mean to make speeches. Okay, you done?
I think we need to start somewhere.
Yeah, if we're going to start.
It's 5:30 now.
Is it,
Pardon?
easiest loosely, but is it easiest to start with the new schools where we don't have anybody and have to put somebody?
Yes.
way around?
Yes, it is.
Then let's do that.
Let's start with the new schools.
We don't have a map for that, do we?
What map is on the screen right now? What's that data reflecting?
This is current attendance areas.
All right.
So I've got one little study area polygon for the planned east of I-75 school. And it would make sense to start just taking in the closest study areas and try to getting up to its area, its attendance, its enrollment. Sorry, the capacity, which is 650. Now around there, there's AC, there's Liberty. Which, if you look at Liberty, it's already 885 students, already 36% over the capacity living in that area. That would make the most sense to me. You know, of course, we start with the really closest ones. Let's go to there.
Got to look at that dark purple too. Is a pretty good distance away. The school, their District 2 now is a pretty good distance away from where they are.
Is that Yates?
Yates. And I mean, that should factor, I think, at some point in there as well.
Most definitely. Oh, I've got to put our study areas on. I'm sorry.
Lower Yates is 121.
Wow, this computer's being really slow today. But by taking these study areas here, it's about 386 students, taking some from AC, some from Liberty, and then some from Yates.
I know I have it. Okay. What do you need them running on here? No, thank you. What would you guys like him to do?
Oh, is he done?
Can we keep moving to Yates? And
Yeah.
further?
Zoom out just a little bit.
I'm having some issues here. Okay.
I thought we were waiting.
For some reason, I'm not able to show the study areas.
Scott, is that all we're waiting on in this scenario?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get you the study area numbers, but for some reason they're not coming up.
Okay, so we can look at the results here. And the key numbers that pop onto my screen are that ACE is now below 80% capacity in this scenario. So apparently quite a number of the Athens-Childsburg students will go to the new school, which makes sense. But Liberty and Yates are still beyond capacity.
particularly Yates, and 124%.
Just the purple area that was
Right.
kind of odd out there anyway.
And we have, just from basing what I see on Scott's screen, it looks like the area that he's pulled is this little pie shape right here, which includes study area 242, 243, 244, 246, and 246B, 245, and 247. If you're looking for a place to start.
So could we move 131, 132, 133, 134, 118, and 119 to the new school?
That's Liberty? That's you.
That's Liberty, and, no, that's Yates and Dixie.
Okay, so students, did you want 118 and 119?
Sure.
And 35.
Yes, sir.
So that takes you over capacity in the new school.
That area is still growing, right?
And you never want to open a school. You want to always leave room for a new school. Students show up that we had no clue were even in the area.
Like 239, 242, how did they, I mean, I don't even know what area that is, but just a weird judge.
There's 57 students in 242 and 32 students in 239.
How about 116?
Nothing there. And you remember, we can also do the domino effect. We could take some from here and put it down to the planned school, and then relieve some, maybe put it into Liberty, and then relieve some up here. So we can do the domino effect. We don't have to just all go to the planned school.
Scott, can you zoom to your right a little? Yeah, so we can see more that way. Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that's coming in the projections that we're going to be talking about, the new elementary school is right here. And right here in 246, I think the new elementary school is in like 246B or C. In 246, there's a subdivision plan for 240 homes.
Can you zoom it in so we can see the names of like the main roads that cut these numbers off?
Sure. Scott, can you zoom in a little bit? This is I-75.
So like where's Man of War, where's Winchester Road?
Winchester Road.
It almost looks like
Dixie over there too has a lot of capacity left, so I mean, going the other direction, that's back the other way. I mean,
That leaving a magnet,
Okay, this right here is Eagle. Is that what it says? I can't read that. Now it's hard to see. This is Passage Mountain Way. Here's I-75. So
This is Man of War.
right, this one here is Man of War.
Do you want me to zoom in closer?
Well, I'm trying, now in case people say moving like this.
that's basically Andover, Hamburg.
It looks like the line's right down Todd's Road is what it looks like.
Yeah.
It seems like a natural device.
Yeah, the line was actually right down.
Yeah, this is Liberty Road, and then it turns into Todd's Road. And here's Man of War.
This is railroad tracks along here.
We want that little piece inside here. Do we want for the inside man of war for them to have to drive all the way downtown Expo and out for a little bit? That doesn't seem like neighborhood.
Study area 239C. Okay.
You want to go back to Liberty?
Yes.
That seems like a long way to
So
drive.
is this
I mean, when you have to do
This, there are no kids. There are no kids in here.
Yeah.
That's the little shopping complex where
There's
the,
no kids ever going to be there.
that's, where the Ramsey is.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So there's going to be lots of kids at the Orange Leaf, but nobody's staying the night.
I just, that don't seem like a long way.
They want the numbers back, Scott.
I'm trying. It's fighting me today. It's fighting me bad.
You can do it.
Well, what is that? The 2054.
Okay. I want the labels. Come on, there we go. Okay, so we still need to put students in this new school here. We've got it. We're bound by the Todd's Road down here, the 75 Man of War. Makes sense since there's schools here and here to go this way. We could try these 5 right here.
And then take what?
131, 132, 133, 134.
There's like 14 kids in 118.
Right.
That does already put it over capacity, but doesn't mean we have to keep some of these in here. We could put 247 and 248 back to AC.
131 has 114 kids.
I think we put 130 back in Liberty.
You don't want to do that?
Now 131, is there an apartment building there?
Yeah, but Liberty's still at, you still have a capacity a little bit. If you, well, we can get it down and take it down, shuffle down to the 8, maybe. With kids who are closer to living in the state.
And remember, if we do want to put more in Liberty, we can maybe relieve Liberty somewhere else.
With Yates, we're looking at 59. I mean,
This puts it right under capacity, which is using these 4 study areas.
then you've got 2 just kind of hanging out there that get
Yeah.
for no crazy reason.
How many students are in study area 248?
I think it was 14, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 14. And there's 58 down here.
And how many are in the one next to the one that had 58?
This one?
Not that one.
56. So they are across I-75. We might want to look at putting some of these into AC.
Kids are in the multiplex case. Where do they come from? This is okay, but the kids that are in the multiplex and case, where did they come from?
Within Yates boundaries, plus some overflow from Liberty.
Okay, that's what we need to get. We need to do something with that.
Where those
That's the Polo Club court.
Polo Club purple ones that are hanging out there.
We got to put them kids somewhere. One of those schools we got to figure out. They got to go to the new school to get that multiplex.
There's still capacity at Ace, the way this sits, to get the other 2 out. The new schools. Yeah.
Can you add 278A and 278B into the new school just to make sure that when they're districted in there with the new schools go up?
Do you want to repeat that so he can hear you?
Like, should you redistrict 278A and 278B, like, into this new school? I think they're saying there's not a lot of kids in there, but shouldn't it be districted in there because that's where the new houses are going to be built so that it's in that district when that school goes up? Or no?
Well, something like this, using the size 75 as the boundary.
That's getting close.
Getting closer.
We're,
I mean, I know it doesn't pick up kids, but if that's, I mean, like, if that's the whole point of the school being built there, because that's where the new properties are going to be built, then, I mean, maybe that would kind of stop some of the arguments that we're having now with, like, the Stewart Hall, Childbirth areas, because we're, like, when the school is being built and then we district them, we're not putting those areas into that area, that school district, because there's no kids there.
Scott, it would also help, just glancing at the study areas, if we had the urban service boundary on here. Do you have that data?
I sure do.
Because then that would clearly show where growth is not going to occur outside these.
Ah.
Yeah.
Earned your keep and get it for another year.
You can always take a shot at me, right there.
So the urban growth would be here, this dashed line.
Scott, are the purples there both Liberty and Breckenridge, are they the same color?
I'm trying to get to fix that right now.
I just want to make sure I wasn't taking
No.
my
Ask Ron, he can't see the colors anyway.
So AC is the green, Breckenridge is the blue, and this tan color is come on, Scott, is Liberty. Okay.
So you guys now have a non-contiguous thing here with ACE.
Where's ACE? Well,
I put it to the wrong. It's yeah, it is non-contiguous here.
Okay. So that's not ACE, right?
That's it.
But is that where you were supposed to color it?
Can we change it?
Scott? Okay. Okay.
Don't those have to stay?
those are the three.
57, 59, what?
Someone,
I thought that it was.
Okay, so where are we? We're at 434. ACE is still way above.
ACE is still way above.
I mean, the new school, we got 244 sitting right there right next to the new school.
Okay, 257 and 259 and 251 are the only areas they're bringing socioeconomic diversity to ACE.
I don't know. Which one?
257 and 259, these two little green ones.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
251.
You put the north side. 251 is
I mean, what is that?
right now, these two and this one are ACE, right?
251 is not green.
No, Liberty.
No, because you got to change that color, I think.
Liberty, purple, or the pink is Liberty.
But this is the map you guys have been moving.
I didn't can you put it back?
Can you show us the current zones again, Scott?
Blue lines are the current zones.
Yeah, the problem, this area here got put into ACE, and I don't think anybody intended that to happen. It's in Liberty right
So that's bringing. So
now. Yeah, these right here, 242, 43, and 44, those should probably at least temporarily go back into Liberty at 130.
I put them in the wrong spot.
The new school would have a fast for it.
Okay, so that brings ACE below capacity, but Liberty is the one now the problem.
So what would happen if we put 267, 268, 256, that bottom end into ACE?
Well, you've got people who live across the street from Range that aren't in there yet.
Right, well, that's what I'm talking about, that area.
Can we go ahead and put 274, 5, and 6 in there? See what that looks like while we're doing this.
It's already at 180%.
But again, if we're trying to do neighborhood, we can do this and then relieve some of this somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah. Big school is still the one.
So, I mean, if we're doing neighborhood, why is 243 and 244 not in there?
We're basically just recreating that closest school map.
Yep. On this particular school, we are.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good example of what we were talking about.
And you can relieve a little bit of Liberty into the new school right now, and this map looks pretty clean. I mean, pretty close.
That's just there at 100.
But they're at 100.
Better 174 or whatever it was.
Which study area?
So is removing 257 and 259, is that not an option? And busing those kids over? Or I mean, how many kids are in there?
What section did you say?
257, 259.
17 and 21.
And Scott, why did you undo 74, 5, and 6?
Well, I thought it went. I thought that was people didn't want that. I'm sorry.
No, I think people want that.
Okay, so do we want to go from 64B to 277?
Yeah.
264B.
It's perfect, right?
Yeah, we can relieve by taking these out. I didn't hear the answer. Are these not movable?
From what I'm understanding, those are the only two things that are giving the school any kind of socioeconomic diversity.
How many kids are in there?
Yeah, how many kids are in those two?
92 kids. So
75, 4, and 17. Moving those would bring it down to approximately 800.
and how many are in the 265, 252, 253?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to
71 and 265. Nothing in 262, and 9 and 263.
252 and 253.
Oh, I'm sorry. 71, 35, and 6. It's about 110.
Do we want to try to move that group?
Well, you're taking, where is that?
57.
Got to hand over. How many that they hand over?
I mean, you're taking people who are already there,
They're already there. 759 hand over.
and kicking them out, and putting people.
Yeah, remember you're trying to do the least amount of moves here.
Yeah, they're in H right now.
How many kids are there?
So the dark blue line is what the current attendance area is. we can move these.
How many is that?
All right, 273 has 45, 276 is 24, and 51. So over 100 students.
So, do we want to try to move those back to Breckenridge?
Which one?
The ones that's got the 264 that straight back down.
This area right here, these 5 study areas, is a little like 110 students. I mean, do they have to go? Can they go to Squires?
I definitely don't think
Right. Why can't you put 252, 53, and 265 in the new elementary school?
Because they're already in A.
Well, but we've got capacity in the new one. We don't have capacity in these.
It's right down the road.
I mean, I understand, but the argument is they were making earlier was not to move the least amount of bodies, and since they're already there, you're not going to want to move them from a school they're already in.
Well, when you have a new school is going to require you're going to move a lot of students. So that really doesn't apply here.
Why don't we just look and see what 265, 252, 253, 243, 244 going to the new school looks like.
Thank you.
That's a pretty good break point.
Jim, are you able to identify roughly where which study areas will have to develop in this area?
Yeah, they're going to throw it.
We got it by
you're breaking up a little bit.
neighborhood itself.
So,
We provided that not by study areas, so much say, but just neighborhood in general.
By eyeballing it, are you able to roughly tell us which of these study areas we should have capacity for?
Probably do that, yeah. But that's the number of households going in there.
Okay, so that gives us a really funky looking attendance area, but it does bring us to a little closer to where we want to be.
But now it's the planned school that has a 5%.
You're splitting a neighborhood.
right, but we're trying to get somewhere to. I agree.
You're taking people who are already there, taking them out, bringing them into school, and they're moving all.
And we're reducing Yates down to less than 60% capacity while moving ACE and the new school beyond capacity from get-go. And we want to try to avoid, especially the new school. We don't want to have happen in this new school what happened at Wellington, where we opened up.
What if we came at it from a different angle, and because Yates was now very far below, and started pulling from Liberty up to Yates, opening up space in Liberty maybe, and being able to kind of go at it from a different angle.
I mean,
You're saying so take some of this Yates here and start taking some of this area?
Yeah.
That's where I was saying the domino effect. We could look at that.
Right. And maybe get an idea of how that capacity shift might open up some of the space of the other schools we've been looking at.
Okay, I'm just going to change the color of Yates real quick.
I just want to remind the committee members of a piece of data that you have. I just want to remind the committee members about a piece of data that you have that you haven't looked at, but you may want to when you're looking at the new school, and that is that by study area we know the number of private school students living in those areas. And it's quite possible that a new school opening up will be, there's an Amber Alert in
Florence, Kentucky.
Florence, so that's why people keep hearing this go up. So Scott doesn't have it up as part of this because this is, he does have that data available, and when you start looking at projections, you can ask for that as well.
Okay, so which study areas do you want to bring into Yates? you want to start with these, or?
Sure.
Not many students there. Let's go with this.
Helps Club.
So we're up to 83% at Yates.
Do we want, kind of question for the committee people, do we want to keep the split northern district, or do we want to try to make those closer so kids aren't going across town and past schools?
I don't think we can avoid going past schools where the schools are built. So,
Or, I mean, the way that this line looked, though, it,
You know, I'm going to suggest, and it's going to put a little damper on today, but we're still trying working with one school. This is going to take a very long time with this elementary district. I think if you guys give me some criteria of what you want to see, least students change, get rid of the non-contiguous areas, try to keep as a close neighborhood school as possible. If you give me your list of criteria, I can then do what I did for the high schools, come up with a least change, and then we can modify and tweak it from there. Does that sound good? Because I think right now we have the whole district splat against the wall, and I think there's a lot of changes that are going to need to be made. So let's see what we can, maybe I come up with it and you guys tweak it.
Sounds good to me.
I'm okay.
I think I'd be.
Could we also, while we're doing this, could we give him a list of known inequities that we would like to address in this redistricting process, like the Stewart Hall issue? Hundreds of those.
I think it depends on what you consider an equity.
Well, that's up to each one. That's a criteria. I didn't.
I'm not using my head.
Oh, me. It depends on each individual's thought about what would be an inequity. Sure, we can debate what an inequity is, but we really haven't tried to laundry list those or get them on the table. You know, there's some one-off stuff, but we really haven't tried to comprehensively come up with the things that our time to make it right and level a playing field with that. So we should try to do that.
And I'm not aware, you're not going to like me on the inequities, I apologize, I'm not sure. What is the Stewart Hall issue? I mean, just elaborate. Any other inequities? I'm not aware of it.
It's a neighborhood that's closer to 3 other elementary schools than the one currently assigned. But currently trying, including Breckenridge, and they live closer to Liberty, Ace, and the new school. Right.
I think that's our equity, though. We're going to fix it.
And actually, when I'm doing this, I would actually prefer not to know these inequities, because that's what your job is. I'll come up with what makes sense to me, not knowing the areas, not knowing that a certain neighborhood, like you just mentioned, is the problem, or not a problem, you know what I mean, it has some concerns. And then when you bring it back to you, you guys can go, wait, 109 can't move, let's change it back, and then go from there. I think if you give me your list of criteria, then I can work with that and work within that based on those guidelines. And I could bring you something that's going to fit as much of those as possible.
Staff, is there any way we can minimize that static?
It's on Scott's side. Scott, are you moving around in your office?
Not at all.
Shirt or something. Or are you wearing a mic? Like, are you wearing a headset?
I'm wearing a headset with a microphone in front. It could be my beard.
Could be new shade.
No. Is that better? I moved away from my beard a little. Is that any
Do you
better?
have another way? That's a little better. Yeah.
If you give me a phone number, I can call in on a phone too.
Okay, you're fine.
And I would just want to make a quick comment too on the
Yeah, me too.
I think when we look at things like capacity, we remove the piece of inequity. There are so many inequities in our district, period, not just one area. We have academic inequities, or we have students who go to schools that are low performing. We can't fix every inequity, and we shouldn't single out some because of where they are and make the most noise. I think capacity is one of the things that we actually look at those. That's something we can agree on. Just don't want it. Good. As you should. But everybody knows what these things are. No matter what they say. People are choosing to everything represented in this room are, and we haven't had that happen. But I don't think we should single out and say there are inequities in one group and begin to work our way from that. We even went away from the thing. But I was actually okay with that because you can't speak three districts. It's not a deficit, it's either free and reduced. Community where is that it's promised that we put extra resources in those locations. Like you won't pick driving to this.
Okay, you guys have cut out.
That's why sometimes I guess it doesn't mean not implementing because I don't know all the neighborhoods in the street. So therefore, I'm only looking at capacity and what is contiguous to the area that we have. And you don't want people to here, but I'm not looking at a neighborhood. I don't even know the neighborhood per se. Okay, and so I wish that we could just remove that. That's what took us all this whole time today. It took us forever to just pick and piece places. And then at the end of the day, God comes back to what he has done in the past to say, let me work the numbers from away from the whole inequity piece, and then we get a fair piece. And that's what we breathe each time after we go through all this stuff in the beginning. That's just my one comment I just want to add. And
I would like to add to that as well, because looking at where somebody decided to buy a house or because of Stewart Hall here in large numbers, so we're going to look at where they bought their house or where their children go to school with inequity. I mean, I'm almost offended by that. My child had friends that live in Stewart Hall, and I have spent hours speaking to their parents about this process. And I love these people. I mean, I don't live in Stewart Hall. I know lots of people that live over there. I play soccer with these people. We play lacrosse with these people, and I get it. I do. I understand that their life's work is in these homes, and this was an investment for them. But guess what? Where I live, my child was bused 4 or 5 miles, but he was bused to Julius Marks, so I didn't say a word. The problem is their child is going to a school that they don't like. The problem is their children are going to school with children that they don't, maybe I wouldn't use the word like, but that they feel they shouldn't have to go to school with. It isn't necessarily that it's 4 miles away. And so we're not going to look at it as an inequity because their child has to be bused a little bit further because of where it's built. We just had this conversation. I'm not a builder. I'm sitting beside you. We just had this conversation that we look at where there's space, so we build a new school. We build all these new houses. Well, just because we build the school there and we build lots of new houses, in our minds we should already know that just because there's a school and there are all these new houses, that might not be where our children go. sometimes there's logic there that we have to use prior to getting to this point. It's not an inequity. It's life. And sometimes it isn't fair, and sometimes things happen that we don't agree with. But to say that it's an inequity that has to be part of a decision this big for an entire city, for 300,000 people, I don't agree with.
I would like to clarify.
I want to make sure that we don't spiral out of control here. It's not personal to anyone. Let's all try to remember that we're trying to do the whole district, and we want to do it as equitably for all as we can. And let's try not to make it more than what we have here.
I like the idea of not addressing whatever people consider to be equities or inequities at the moment. I like the idea, Scott, with not knowing neighborhoods, to take a stab at this like he's done with the other levels, and then work from there. We're the ones that know the neighborhoods. We can address those issues if we decide they need to be addressed.
But we will.
I don't question anyone's motives here. We all have different takes on things. People in the audience have different takes on things. You know, me in particular, when I read all the comments, I read them all. It starts with I, opposed to our. I think people start with our. They're all our kids, our families. And it starts with why. I go, okay. And then, you know, when the second, well, I wouldn't go there. But I like the idea of what Scott suggested. We're not making a lot of progress here. And I think 5 of us could sit down for a weekend and crank out some maps and present it to people. That's not what the process is. But we could crank out some scenarios and then work around the fringes of that. We could make much more progress than we're doing now.
Yes, I agree with that 100%.
Inequity was my word that I chose. So if that has offended anybody, I apologize. Don't take it out on anybody who's here representing a particular neighborhood. That was my choice of words. And it was things like capacity, free and reduced lunch. Those numbers are hard numbers in our spreadsheets, and that's going to be easy for Scott to quantify and look at. What I was suggesting, I thought that there were some undisputed, less tangible things that we wanted to address in this process. And I thought that those neighborhoods, Stewart Hall was one. But apparently that's not the case, and I apologize. So yes, I will withdraw, and we will take Scott's approach and do it down the road. But I thought that it was non-controversial. I thought that it was just a no-brainer because one of our guiding principles, a significant guiding principle, is neighborhood schools. So how can you discuss neighborhood schools? I apologize for the technical term. I didn't mean it to be anywhere.
And I agree, like with the Andover area. Like I agree that like I felt like we shouldn't move them from their neighborhood school, that they're already a part of that school. Like I feel like we shouldn't like take them out of that school and put them in a new school. You know, like I agree with that. But when you that fail, and with one particular neighborhood, that doesn't fit.
I think we have to be careful. There's a lot of upset people all over the place.
But before we give up,
sorry, I just
can we
said there's
look
a lot of
at
upset people all over the place.
the other elementary school has 0 kids at this point, and just let's give us the point to start. We know good and well this is not the ending point, and there's going to be a lot of tweaking going on. Let's look at it and get there, and at the end of this day we can look at what we got and tweak from there.
I want to reiterate our process so that we don't get too far away from it. Is we're still looking at overall 30,000 foot view ideas for how these lines will be drawn. We don't have that. We look for specific neighborhoods by name yet, but that when we start to do that, and we have a conversation about tangential issues, grandfathering, siblings, travel, etc., we will begin to take even more to heart those comments and concerns from the community. At that point, we'll be having open forums and we'll be hearing those. But right now, we still have to get to a starting point where we're comfortable that to include any number of other things. The most significant and easily definable amongst those being capacity. That's the point at which we want to get ourselves before we can have any of these other more serious and personal conversations. We're not there yet. And I don't want us to spiral into that until we're ready to be there.
And,
right
and I don't.
now, we should, and I think Scott is our best defense here. We should be non-denominational in all of this. The numbers should be guiding us. Common sense should be guiding us as we put these initial plans together. And I'm hopeful that that will be the jumping off point where we can start fine-tuning with all these other things in mind.
So Alan,
I believe, and I have believed, Coach, just a second, that that's been the process that we were following all along. So let's not deviate from that prematurely. Let's stay the course and get to that point.
so if we decide Scott wants to kind of build a starting point, is this a map that we even want to put out for people, that this is just kind of an experiment? I mean, I don't know that this is something we want to put out there.
At this point, I don't believe so. I think when I come back with something, if you feel that you want to put it out, then you can at that point, unless you want to wait till the first meeting, and then we'll go from there, the first meeting in January, and go from there.
This is just going to cause...
This will cause problems, yeah. This is nothing. We worked on it for 15 minutes and couldn't decide on 3 study areas. I say, if you guys, I've got some criteria that I think, hearing you speak, that's important to you. I've heard a lot about doing the least changes. So that's one of the criteria. Of course, the capacity number. Trying to get the non-contiguous neighborhood schools and then the free and reduced lunch, looking at that. If I look at those 5 criteria, is that something that you guys are comfortable me working on this with?
Scott, did you say closest schools?
Yeah, I said least changes and neighborhood schools. Neighborhood is to me closest.
Okay.
Yeah, and non-contiguous areas if we can avoid it.
And we have to be mindful of capacity.
And I take into account things like, you know, the traffic patterns and where I-75 is. That's like what we did with the new school. And some of the bigger roads, that's why the study areas are split on them, so it's easy to go back and forth. We're talking about K-5 students here now, so major streets are a little bit more important than they were in the high school and middle school.
Let me ask the committee something, Scott, before you move down that road. Can we get to some sort of a loose agreement amongst ourselves as to what is tolerable, for example, on the capacity? Each one of these scenarios, we're jumping one school from 50% to 120% and anywhere in between. Are there intolerable levels below which you don't want Scott to put us? And presents this next scenario.
There's a cost scenario there, I would argue. I mean, can you be over capacity, all these equally, and still not have to use portables? I don't know the answer to that question, but I've heard a couple of comments like, well, 125% capacity is better than 170%. Well, yeah, it is, but still 125% would be too much for me.
Essentially, that's the question I'm asking.
I mean, I think we should shoot. He's just starting for us, so I think he should shoot for 100 or less to the extent we can, and we can have the conversation as much as we can.
I'm looking.
Just so you guys can see these totals, with the 2 new schools, last year there would have been 20,725 seats and 19,000 students. You should have the capacity for every school to be under 100%. Now that, you know, we have seats in schools where we don't have people living nearby, we get that. But there is the capacity with these 2 new buildings to have everybody under 100%.
Tell me, anybody else have another thought on this particular question?
So you should be able to have every school at least 85%, like between 85 and 100, or no? 93.
Well, it's 93 is where we are now.
Right, so what I'm saying is individuals, we can aim to have them, like if the
Well, the perfect
I
scenario-
think what I try to do when I do this is 5% either way.
What's the classroom size?
Yeah, that's reasonable. A 5% variance either way. So we're looking at 88 to 98.
And what about leaving
No.
the at around 80% capacity?
Well, we probably should do that, but let's try to get to a point without doing specifics. Everybody good with that? That range from 80, what did we say, 88 to 98, Scott, is where we'd like to see the results of some of this work.
Okay.
All right, great.
And so the next meeting is January 8th, correct? So I will.
Folks, we're going to meet again tomorrow morning at 7 and begin this conversation again. No, you're right. The next meeting is scheduled for January the 3rd, I think. Whatever. Anyway.
Okay. All right.
First week. Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to try to get you guys my initial map by the 23rd. Give you all Christmas to look at it.
Your beard is back.
Oh, sorry. It grows quick.
Okay.
Can you repeat what you were saying, Scott?
I'm going to try to give you something by midweek next week. And
that'd be great.
So you can have it over the break. We can come in January 8th. Everybody's looked at it and vetted it and figure out what they want to say about it.
I'll be in my office next Thursday, so you can send it to me.
Okay. Well, Merry Christmas to you.
No, the Jewish kids don't have to worry. All right. We've got, Lisa, you got something?
No.
Okay. I would like us to begin just a very light thought process amongst ourselves here about grandfathering. As I read through so many of the comments in Let's Talk, and certainly the ones that I have been receiving, I think many of the concerns that our parents throughout the community have can be assuaged if we recognize that grandfathering may or may not help their concerns. And so I don't have an answer, by the way. I don't, and really don't have a dog in the fight, other than to say that each you recognize that that can have an impact on some of our work. And I'd like to philosophically feel this committee out as to what you think about that. Ron, you're first.
I'd like to ask a question since we have a board representative here. In the past, at least when we've done individual school redistrictings, the board has had a philosophy that they would like to grandfather to the extent possible. So, if Melissa could address that and say this is something we're going to do, and we can make recommendations committee certainly. But and it's a different, it's a matter of how many years you go back, and siblings get to go. There's lots of issues to discuss there. But I think grandfathering to not pull people out of the schools where they already have a relationship with the teachers and the staff and other students is something that I think we pretty much all be in agreement with to the extent possible, and I think the board is going to want to do that.
I tend to agree. We've not discussed it, but I think that would be a charge left for you all as well. We've always had it in the past, and I feel the same way.
There are varying degrees of that, though. Do we, in the elementary schools, grandfather a child in who has just begun and stay there through the whole K through 5 experience, or do we cut it off at 4th grade or 3rd grade? So I mean, those sorts of things. And then there's the tangential issue of
Siblings and transportation.
Yeah, right. That's where it gets sticky.
Right. The transportation really does become a little bit difficult. And if you just look at the scenarios we just were dealing with, the new school and ACE and Yates, et cetera,
by those moves. So I'd like to get a flavor of what we're thinking here. Bill, you look like you had something to say. Oh no, you're just yawning.
No, I just. The reason I'm hesitant in expressing an opinion is that because as we work through the numbers, the decision regarding this grandfathering really factors in heavily. Because what we've just said to Scott is to work on numbers and that we're setting some parameters. It would be interesting to know how many, what percentage of students in each school are grandfathered. And I think then we ought to be able to provide Scott that number, because how will he be able to work? Let's say for the sake of this discussion, I'm just going to use the number. Let's assume for the sake of this discussion that 100 kids in an elementary school are there because they're grandfathered based on previous redistricting. Well, how will Scott be able to work a specific scenario of maximum enrollment if he didn't take that into consideration? So that's the reason why I'm hesitant to provide an opinion, because...
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you a different question. Do you think grandfathering is, if we, can manage the numbers and massage them so that they work within our scenarios, is that something you want to see or not?
It would be something we all have to take a look at.
That's the question I'm trying to ask here. Mathematically, you're absolutely right. But I want to be able to give, before we go into the holiday break, I'd like our community to have a feeling that at least we're adding a guiding principle. That grandfathering should be considered. And I'm trying to find out.
Can I say something real quick, please? That is a concern, but you have to remember it also goes the other way. You might have students in Yates that are attending Yates that don't live in the area that you grandfather in, but there's also going to be students in Yates attendance area that might be grandfathered into another area, to another school. So it's not necessarily there's 600 students there that are going to go there plus 50 students more that are grandfathered in. It's not necessarily going to work that way.
Principal Diaz.
Grandfathering is contingent to the students affected by the redistricting. So we can project how many kids are affected.
That's true.
Many kids, by sheer volume, would have the option to grandfather.
Lester, philosophically, would you like to have grandfathering be considered as one of the things that we want to do as we move forward?
Yes.
Thank you.
But I would like to take into consideration the strain that puts on transportation.
Absolutely. No, there are going to be a lot of contingent liabilities as we go through these processes. But what I'm trying to do is give the community an early Christmas present, if you will, from the Jewish chairman of the board.
Is there anybody that would not like to see
that's good.
To some extent?
Anybody have any issues or problems?
No, I just think if we redistrict and we let the children stay, I just think I would hate to say to a neighborhood, well, you're redistricted to their school, but we can't go there because the school because of the grandfather. I think we have to be prepared to say the school may be over capacity for a few years so that we can let in the kids we redistrict, but also let in the grandfathering. Does that make sense?
And I'm sorry, I thought that was, to me, that was understood. When we redistrict, the kids that live there will get to go there, but there might be overcapacity issues because of the grandfather.
Agreed.
Is there any data related to grandfathering that the committee would like us to start gathering?
We just don't see how other districts or how it's even been done here in the past.
We can certainly give you some historical perspective. In the numbers that Scott had, there is an enrollment code for grandfathering. So, Athens-Charlesburg has been open for how many years, Mary? When did Athens-Charlesburg open? 06. So it's been open it opened in the fall of 06?
Yeah.
Okay, so they were in their 8th year, and we still have children there because of grandfathering. Because
That's because of
of a sibling,
An address.
yes, people who got pregnant the day we broke ground. They're going there now.
That's fair enough.
So would we have to
follow those same grandfather
Not at all. That was what was put into place with the eight. See, when the board adopts a redistricting plan, it also adopts a set of implementation guidelines. And those guidelines then apply to that plan. When Wellington opened, there was a set of guidelines that went with that. And, you know, and I'll research those, I'll get those for you, and we'll look at what we did in Sandersville. We'll try to go back and look at what we did when we opened the 3 new schools in 07. We ought to at least be able to go back that far.
Lisa, if you could add to that, please, in addition to the data, if there were any comments, anything saved historically, good or bad, about the impact of that, if you could include, if you have it, include that in the information packet you sent to us.
We may be able to gather, you know, what that has cost.
Right.
You know, we may be able to try to quantify that.
That'd be great.
Somebody's writing down what we're promising to get.
Maybe we should use actual numbers from the ACE in Wellington to see what grandfathering looks like over time.
We could. I'm also hoping, I didn't want to say it out loud because I don't want to promise what we might not be able to deliver, but if we could go back and look at Wellington as an example of the opening of a new school, I think that there were, because there were 3 schools impacted, Clays Mill, Stonewall, and Picadum, many of those families were given the option to either stay or go. And so perhaps we can get a feel for how many people in schools actually chose to leave as well as stay.
Okay.
I have a question. I don't know if we would have considered this or not, and I know at one point in time we talked about, like if someone enters 9th grade the year or 2 before, if we want to give them access to early admission so they won't have to switch schools at a later point in time. Did we want to do that or not? It's been mentioned before.
I think that falls in. Yeah, I think that falls into the details. Let's push down the road. I can't wrap my little head around that right now.
One thing that I'd like to see maybe as far as data moving forward would just be the number of students impacted in these scenarios as we create them. You know, I know Scott's going to be working on one, so just looking ahead, not looking in the past, but also looking forward, how many students are we affecting, just so we can get an idea of that as well.
Fair enough.
And I think that was a standing request for any scenario that Scott generates to please tell you how many kids that would impact.
Fair enough.
It is, and if you look on the maps I've been providing, I've been putting this number of students living in an area of change. So I've been putting that on the last few maps.
We got it. Anyone else on the committee? Any other thoughts, concerns? If not, Lisa, I want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas. But first, Lester wants to talk.
You want us to meet 6 times in January.
Yeah, when are those meetings?
I don't know. We have the dates for 4 of them.
I don't. I didn't catch that. I knew.
Every Thursday in January.
Okay, all right.
8, 15, no?
I thought one was not.
The first
One was
is
changed.
Oh, it's the 8th.
Oh, yeah, one of them was changed.
Right.
January 27th is the Tuesday meeting.
Right. Three Thursdays and the Tuesday, the 27th in January. And I'm going to work with staff as probably before the beginning of the year, I'll get you those additional dates, and they may or may not be for public input, right? Depending upon where we are as we proceed.
We know that Mondays already has the board meeting conference.
Right.
Are there other days that you all want to place as off limits? Like, are you open to meeting on Friday night?
Friday night? Not after 5 o'clock.
Friday from 3 to 5.
Prerogative of the chair. No Scotch time.
Unless Scotch is well.
More information on the evening, Peter. What about Wednesday night? I know that's the church night for many families. Or
What about Tuesday?
are Wednesdays open or
Tuesdays are
no?
scout nights. There's always something going on.
Okay.
We'll talk about Lisa.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if there were anybody
You
who
and I'll
played.
talk.
Okay.
Okay. Lester, you done?
I got something else, but I'm going to hold it.
Don't hold it. Don't hold it for. Let it all hang out.
This is the hot topic, the hot topic item. This is the bulk of our work. Are we comfortable with where we're at with the high schools and middle schools? Can we put a couple dogs to rest before we move on and get this part done? I mean, are we comfortable with where we left those scenarios?
Not without us taking another look.
I thought that we were going to start there because they're easier, but once we build the elementary thing, feeder patterns and neighborhoods and such, we're going to have to build back ground up and maybe tinker with those scenarios before. That was my understanding.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We do have some of the growth and projection numbers coming in January that we'll be able to look at too for all 3 levels. So I think it's premature to go there.
That's what I'm saying.
Your beard is in.
Given what information we have to date and understanding that that likely could change dramatically with the advent of these new numbers. Yes, ma'am.
And that's, I know that, I guess, that we really need to look with the few amount of changes as possible, and that could help. I know there's going to be a lot of changes, but if we could work with the least amount of changes, that would help us with the grandfather numbers.
Stands to reason. Anyone else? All right. I'm not very good at this, but let me say again, Merry Christmas to everyone.
Happy New Year.
And happy holidays, happy Hanukkah. Or however you want to enjoy your holidays, do it with your families and friends safely. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate everyone's patience.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you, Scott. I'll call you in the morning.
Okay.